Have you ever tried so hard to save money that it ended up costing you far more? Most people think being careful with money is a good habit, and most of the time it is. But there is a point where saving turns into fear, and fear can quietly create problems you never see coming. This is the story of a wealthy merchant named Arthur Collins, a man who learned that lesson in the most unbelievable way. Arthur lived in the busy trading city of Ashford, where merchants from all over the country came to buy and sell goods. His store was one of the most successful in town. Every day he sold fine fabrics, rare spices, beautiful glassware, and expensive perfume. Business was always good, and year after year, his wealth continued to grow.
Although Arthur had more money than he could ever spend, almost nobody would have guessed he was rich. He wore an old patched coat, faded shirts, and clothes that looked like they had been repaired dozens of times. But the first thing people noticed wasn't his clothes, it was his shoes. They were so old that the leather had cracked in every direction. The soles had been stitched together again and again, and several rusty nails stuck out from the bottom. Every step made a squeaking sound that echoed through the marketplace. People often joked that they could recognize Arthur long before they actually saw him. His friends had stopped counting how many times they told him to buy a new pair.
One afternoon, Arthur stopped outside a small coffee shop where a few merchant friends were taking a break. As soon as he sat down, Daniel, one of his oldest friends, looked under the table and laughed. "Arthur," he said with a smile, "your shoes have worked harder than most people in this city. Don't you think they've earned a retirement?" The others laughed with him. Another merchant added, "You probably made enough money this week to buy 20 new pairs." Arthur simply smiled and took a sip of his coffee. "They still protect my feet," he replied. "Why would I spend money replacing something that still works?" Daniel shook his head. "Sometimes replacing something early costs less than waiting until it's too late." Arthur chuckled and waved the comment away. To him, spending money on something he didn't absolutely need felt like throwing money away. He believed that habit had made him successful, and nobody was going to change his mind. A few days later, Arthur completed one of the best business deals of the year. He bought a collection of elegant, hand-blown glass bottles and filled each one with expensive imported perfume. As he lined them up on a wooden shelf inside his shop, he couldn't hide his excitement. He knew customers would pay a premium for them, and he was already calculating the profit in his head. Feeling pleased with himself, Arthur decided to take the afternoon off and visit the city's public bathhouse. It wasn't something he did very often, but after such a profitable week, he thought he had earned a little time to relax. What he didn't know was that this simple decision would change everything. The bathhouse was crowded that afternoon. Steam filled the rooms while merchants and travelers relaxed after a long day of work. Arthur placed his clothes and his old shoes beside a wooden bench before walking into the steam room. A few minutes later, the city's police chief arrived. He carefully placed his neatly polished leather shoes beside his own clothes and headed into another room. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary until a young prankster noticed the two pairs of shoes sitting only a few feet apart. Looking around to make sure nobody was watching, he quietly switched them. Arthur's worn-out shoes now sat beside the police chief's clothes, while the chief's expensive leather shoes rested beside Arthur's belongings. Smiling to himself, the prankster disappeared into the crowd, never imagining that his harmless joke was about to create a chain of disasters. When Arthur finished his bath, he returned to the changing area and reached for his shoes. Instead of the old pair he had worn for years, he found a brand new pair of polished leather shoes waiting beside his clothes. He looked around, expecting someone to claim them, but nobody did. After standing there for a moment, he smiled to himself. "Maybe my friends finally got tired of teasing me," he thought. Without another question, Arthur slipped on the new shoes. They fit perfectly. As he walked out of the bathhouse, he couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, every step felt soft and comfortable. He believed he had just received the best free gift of his life.
He had no idea that before the sun set that evening, those same shoes would cost him more than he had ever imagined. Arthur had barely walked halfway home before his lucky day quietly turned into his worst one. A few minutes after he left the bathhouse, Chief Robert Hayes finished his bath and returned to the changing room. The moment he looked down, his expression changed. His polished leather shoes had disappeared. In their place sat an old pair of cracked, patched shoes that looked ready to fall apart. The chief picked one up with 2 fingers and frowned. Whose shoes are these? Nobody answered at first. Then an older merchant glanced over and immediately recognized them. "They belong to Arthur Collins," he said. "Everyone in town knows those shoes." Chief Hayes didn't waste another second. He ordered 2 officers to find Arthur and bring him in immediately.
Arthur was unlocking the door to his house when he heard horses stop behind him. Before he could turn around, 2 officers stepped out and called his name. At first, he thought there had been some mistake. "There has been," one officer replied. "You're wearing the chief's shoes." Arthur looked down at his feet. His heart sank. He quickly explained that he thought someone had left the shoes for him as a gift. It sounded honest to him, but the story sounded impossible to everyone else. By sunset, Arthur was standing in front of Chief Hayes, returning the shoes and paying a heavy fine for taking property that wasn't his. As he walked home carrying his old shoes again, he couldn't stop thinking about the money he had just lost. "If I'd known whose shoes they were," he muttered, "I never would have touched them." For the first time in years, he looked at his old shoes with frustration instead of pride. That evening, Arthur decided those shoes had caused enough trouble. He opened the window overlooking the river behind his house and threw them as far as he could. The shoes splashed into the water and quickly floated away with the current. Arthur smiled with relief. He believed the problem had finally disappeared. By the next afternoon, he realized it hadn't. Early the following morning, a fisherman named Samuel Brooks was casting his net into the river as he had done for years. When he pulled the net back, something felt unusually heavy. Expecting a large catch, Samuel smiled and pulled harder. Instead of fish, he found an old pair of shoes tangled in the ropes. Rusty nails sticking out of the soles had ripped several large holes through his fishing net. Samuel stared at the damage in disbelief. That net wasn't just a tool, it was how he earned a living. Then he recognized the shoes. Almost everyone in Ashford had seen Arthur wearing them. Without saying a word, Samuel carried them straight back to Arthur's house. Arthur wasn't home when Samuel arrived. Seeing an open bedroom window, Samuel tossed the shoes inside and walked away. A second later, loud crashing sounds echoed through the house. Arthur rushed upstairs and stopped in the doorway. The shoes had landed directly on the shelf where he kept his expensive perfume bottles. Glass covered the floor. The sweet smell of perfume filled the room. Every bottle he had prepared only days earlier was shattered beyond repair. Arthur slowly knelt beside the broken glass. Those bottles represented weeks of work and a large part of his expected profit. Now, there was nothing left to sell. He had spent years protecting every dollar he earned. Yet in just 2 days, those old shoes had already cost him far more than a new pair ever would have. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the broken bottles scattered across the floor. He realized throwing the shoes into the river had only passed the problem to someone else, and somehow the problem had found its way back to him. As the first light of morning appeared through the window, a new idea came to mind. This time, he wasn't going to throw the shoes away. He was going to bury them where no one would ever find them. Arthur believed that would finally end the nightmare. Instead, it only made the next disaster even bigger. Before sunrise the next morning, Arthur carried the shoes into his backyard with a shovel over his shoulder. He waited until the streets were empty then began digging a hole beneath an old oak tree. His plan seemed simple. If the shoes disappeared underground, they could never cause another problem. Just as he finished covering the hole, his neighbor, Mr. Harris, happened to look over the fence. From where he stood, it looked as though Arthur had secretly buried something valuable. Mr. Harris remembered the city's law. Anyone who discovered hidden treasure had to report it to the mayor. Convinced Arthur was hiding gold, he hurried straight to City Hall. Within an hour, Mayor William Carter and several officers arrived at Arthur's house. "Mr. Collins," the mayor said, "we've been told you've buried something valuable." Arthur looked from the mayor to the officers and sighed. "It wasn't treasure," he replied. "It was my old shoes." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then a few officers exchanged puzzled looks. The mayor folded his arms. "You're asking me to believe that a successful businessman woke up before sunrise just to bury an old pair of shoes?" Arthur nodded. "I know it sounds strange, but it's the truth." Unfortunately, the truth sounded far less believable than the rumor. After searching the yard and finding nothing but the shoes, the mayor warned Arthur that wasting the city's time came with a heavy penalty. Arthur paid another expensive fine and watched the officers leave, wondering how every attempt to solve one problem somehow created another. That evening, Arthur sat alone in his empty shop. Only a few weeks earlier, the shelves had been full, his business had been thriving, and he had felt proud of every dollar he saved. Now the broken perfume bottles were gone. His savings were shrinking, and the same old shoes were sitting beside his chair as if nothing had happened. Arthur stared at them for a long time before quietly saying, "There has to be one place where they'll never come back." The next morning, he left town before anyone was awake and walked several miles to a large pond outside Ashford. Certain that nobody would ever find them there, he threw the shoes into the water and watched them slowly sink beneath the surface. For the first time in days, he smiled. He believed the nightmare was finally over. He couldn't have been more wrong. The pond supplied water to the entire city through a large underground pipe. As the current carried the shoes across the bottom, they drifted straight toward the pipe and became tightly wedged inside the opening. By the following morning, water had stopped flowing into Ashford. Homes had no running water. Restaurants couldn't open. Bakeries couldn't make bread. Within hours, frustrated residents crowded the streets, demanding answers. City workers searched the entire system until one of them reached inside the blocked pipe and pulled out an old pair of patched shoes. Everyone immediately recognized them. There wasn't another pair like them in the whole city. Arthur was brought back to City Hall once again. This time, nobody accused him of doing it on purpose, but the damage had affected thousands of people, and someone had to accept responsibility. Arthur tried to explain that he had only wanted to throw the shoes away. The mayor believed him, but accidents still have consequences. Arthur spent several weeks in jail and paid another large fine. By the time he returned home, most of the fortune he had spent years building was gone. Looking at the shoes again, Arthur finally reached his limit. "I'm burning them," he whispered. "It's the only way." He gathered wood in the backyard and prepared a fire, but the shoes were still damp from the pond. Knowing they wouldn't burn while wet, he carried them onto the roof to dry in the afternoon sun. His old dog, Buddy, followed him upstairs. Arthur turned away for only a moment. Buddy playfully nudged one of the shoes with his nose. Arthur heard it slide across the roof. He spun around and reached for it, but he was too late. The shoe slipped over the edge. At that exact moment, Mayor Carter was leading a community parade through the street below. The shoe fell from the roof and landed squarely on the mayor's hat, knocking it to the ground. The crowd gasped. Then complete silence filled the street. Arthur closed his eyes. He already knew what was coming. When Arthur stood before the mayor one last time, he didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he calmly told the entire story from beginning to end. He described the accidental shoe swap at the Bathhouse, the fisherman, the broken perfume bottles, the misunderstanding in his backyard, the blocked water pipe, and now, the parade. The room remained silent until he finished. Finally, the mayor leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Arthur," he said gently, "I've met people who wasted money without thinking, but you're the first man I've met who lost a fortune trying not to spend it." For the first time in a long while, Arthur laughed too. Not because the situation was funny, but because he realized how true those words were. The next morning, Arthur walked into a shoe store and bought a sturdy new pair without asking for the cheapest price or trying to bargain. As he walked home, he noticed something surprising. The shoes didn't just feel lighter on his feet. He felt lighter too. He finally understood that saving money is a wise habit, but refusing to spend it when it truly matters can quietly become its own kind of waste. Sometimes we don't lose the most because life is unfair. Sometimes we lose the most because we keep holding on to something long after it's time to let it go. We've all held on to something because replacing it felt unnecessary. Sometimes it's an old habit. Sometimes it's an old belief. And sometimes it's just an old pair of shoes. The hard part isn't letting go. The hard part is realizing when it's time.